Okay, are there any others from anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to common consent.
Chair, I'd make a motion that we approve the appointments in the common consent agenda as they're listed.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, second by Councilmember Chaburka to adopt the item of common consent. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you to those who are serving on the committee or continuing to serve on the committee as well. Is there a Mary Carroll, Jeremy Smith, or Danny Wright here? Just want to thank you for your service on that committee.
He's going to present on the next.
I know. It kind of worked out, doesn't it?
Oh, I thought you asked me to come up. This is my night, I guess.
Okay.
Do you want me to start now, or I'll
Yeah,
come back?
so on the item of public hearing, if you would just make sure to present all items that we'll be taking action on, so we can take action on all items.
We're going to have a few come up and speak on this. I'll speak to the first section, and then Lisa and Sarah Meese will be addressing as well. I'm Jeremy Smith. I'm the Deputy Division Manager for Community Development, and I'll be talking today about our Annual Action Plan Amendment Number 1 for fiscal year 23. As you know, we received a couple federal grants called the Community Development Block Grant and the Home Partnership Agreement Grant. The requirement for these grants is that we do a, there we go, sorry, is that we do a 5-year consolidated plan. Every 5 years, we broadcast what we'll be doing with the money we receive, what goals we have, how it will be invested in the community, and those are specific to housing needs here. So in addition to that, every 5 years, we're also required to do an annual action plan. So we are specifically detailing what we plan on doing for the upcoming year. And that's in the beginning of the fiscal year, and those are based on estimates of what we project will happen as far as properties being sold, bought. And we do that in the beginning, like I said, and then throughout the year, or sometime like now, we do an amendment. And that's why we're here tonight. We adjust from those estimates the actual numbers that we received thus far in the year, and we also adjust goals and our budget to accommodate the moving forward for the remainder of the year. This is what this amendment looks like from the budget standpoint. We are looking to move, increasing the budget by $2,138,427. And that is in the form shown here, increase in program income carryover and program income carryover. This is the breakdown of the programs of where that money goes. In Ogden, we're proposing a change of an increase of $250,000 to that program. This will accommodate the goal increasing from 25 to 45 loans. We're also proposing to increase the federal funds in the quality neighborhoods to $1 million, or increase by $1,193,832. Our help program would increase by $214,526, and the administrative costs of our federal dollars would increase by $163,383,000 for a total change of $1,821,741. For business development, there's also changes affected to their federal funds. The small business loan program would increase by $400,000. CV Business Recovery Fund, $8,550. CV Business Recovery Fund for micro enterprises, $8,082. And the reallocation of CDBG CV administration funds decreased by $99,946. Decrease, that's what I said. Okay, decrease. As far as our goals, we also are looking to make a change in the Ogden program, where in the past fiscal year, we increased that amount from $5,000 to $10,000 for down payment assistance. This was necessary to react to the market increase in home values. Found that the $5,000 wasn't adequate to help people buy homes with the elevated prices that the market had jumped to. So That was raised to 10,000. In order to do that, we're requesting an additional 250 so that we can maintain our goal of 45 down payment loans per year. And then this is the schedule. The public comment period began November 6th. That goes until went till December 5th. We had a city council work session on the 29th, November. The public hearing to adopt is tonight, December 6th, and that will go into effect if adopted tomorrow. And then our fiscal year ends on June 30th. That's all that I had for my presentation.
Thanks, Jeremy. Before we move to the next item, is there any questions for Jeremy on amendment number 1?
Okay?
See, none. I got one for you really quick.
Oh, sure.
So you're requesting that we add federal funds to the Quality Neighborhoods Initiative?
The Quality Neighborhoods Initiative is the overall umbrella and has several sources in it.
Right.
So yes, they're already there, but it's not the same. It's not Quality Neighborhood funds that are through like our other sources, RDA, that type of thing. These are specific, the Quality Neighborhood funds that include just the federal funds of the grants we already have.
Perfect. So the EDO lease revenue that we commit about
Yeah,
$1 million
separate.
annually is totally separate.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anything else? Okay.
I think that's it. Okay, is Kathy on the next one? There she is. Oh, Lisa.
Thank you. Along with the changes to the annual action plan, we're asking you to adopt a budget ordinance. This will align the federal HUD budget with the changes that Jeremy outlined. His bottom number was $2,138,427. We round for budgeting, so the total appropriation would be an increase of $2,138,500. And in connection with community developments, this budget is put together to align with the presentation you just had. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? Okay. Now, I think it's Kathy for the loan program guidelines. Sarah, okay.
Sarah.
All right, good evening, council members. Along with the annual action plan amendment, we're proposing a change to the program guidelines for the microenterprise loan program and our small business loan program. So just for background, both of our loan programs currently provide loans up to $90,000 with interest rates up to 12% to assist Ogden businesses. Both of those programs are intended to serve businesses that may not yet qualify for bank loans or other traditional financing, and that could be due to factors such as a lack of operating history, negative credit impacts, things along those lines. So historically speaking, the interest rates for our loan programs are generally based on the prime interest rate plus 1.5% to 8%. And that's pretty similar to how other non-traditional financing institutions price their loans as well. Generally, when you're making riskier loans, you price your interest rates a little bit higher than what a bank might do. So our borrowers can also receive interest rates that are on the lower end of that range due to factors such as collateral or credit. So if the loan's really well secured or if the borrower has very strong credit, they're likely to receive an interest rate that's on the lower end of that range. So there are a couple of other reasons why we like to price our interest rates higher than bank loans. One is that we want to make sure that we're not competing with banks or other lenders that are already available here in our area. We really want to encourage our borrowers to refinance with a bank or other lender as soon as they qualify for traditional financing. And then secondly, we want to make sure that our loan programs are really focused on serving those businesses that don't yet qualify for traditional financing. So as of November, the prime rate was at 7%, and we know that there may be more increases in the coming months. So what we're proposing here tonight is to increase the maximum interest rate for the small business loan program and the microenterprise loan program from 12% to 15% to ensure that we can continue pricing our rates above prime. And that's all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah?
Yeah, just one question, and I apologize because I didn't really think about this in the work session until later, but just curious if we have any figures on what the default rate is for these loans.
I don't on hand this evening, but we'd be
That's
happy
fine.
to provide that for
That'd be
you
great,
as a
thank you.
follow-up.
Okay, anyone else? Okay,
Chair, it just occurred to me, as you were talking about the rate, how it changes, how do you calculate that, or how do you, is there some kind of a formula you go by? So it's not just subjective, or,
Not
you
a
know.
set formula, but it's part of our underwriting process. So looking at how the loan is secured, the credit worthiness of the borrower, their past financial performance, their cash flow projections. So it's a number of factors that we look at in our underwriting. We do try to be consistent internally, but it's not coming from a set formula.
Okay, thank you.
anyone else? Okay, will you be taking the micro enterprise loan program guideline as well?
That is the same presentation, actually. So both programs, same change.
Gotcha, my bad.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. I was just hoping I'd finally get Kathy to present one of these. Okay, this is a public hearing, so if anybody cares to address the council on either the micro enterprise loan program guidelines, the small business loan program guidelines, or the annual action plan amendment number 1 and related budget amendment, this is your opportunity. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Angel Castillo, Ogden resident. Our small business loans and the programs that we do are great. And it was mentioned in the previous work session that the default rate on those is pretty low. And so I highly encourage you to support small businesses and provide access to loans so that people can start businesses. What I want to talk about is to encourage you to, in the future, think differently about how we are building homes for people and creating those spaces. We need them. And we have a challenge doing the exact same thing that we've been doing for the beginning of the program, which is a brilliant program. It's wonderful. I mean, all of the things that the city does for providing down payment and attempting to build housing that is affordable for people is great. But since I first came before you and attended my very first city council meeting in 2018, I have not shut up about housing nor public safety because it's a problem. And I've been studying with and working with Kristen Cox, who is a big theory of constraints person. You might remember her working for Governor Herbert and reducing the Utah budget by 25% without firing anybody, without laying anybody off, and without reducing services. And that has to do with capacity, and it also has to do with something called breakthrough results. And to get breakthrough results, you cannot continue to do the same thing. You have to do something different. You have to identify the primary customer, what is their need, and why aren't they able to provide it themselves. And that has everything to do with the fact that we're doing single-family homes. And I encourage you to embrace what we just did with zoning, with ADUs and cottage homes, and to think differently and not just continue to rubber stamp exactly what's been going through. Chris likes to say that if you want to put out a waste paper basket fire in your office, you don't do it with a tablespoon of water. You do it with a significant enough amount of water to put that fire out, and that is called dosage. And that is, what does the primary customer need? When do they need it? How much of it do they need? Because if you just sit in your office and throw tablespoons on that waste paper basket fire, it is not going out. We are not going to move the needle on housing until we do something differently. So please, as we move forward, obviously I want you to approve this because we need it, but I am encouraging you to stretch and to think bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I might have misunderstood. I thought it was all topics.
That's coming
budget.
up. That's
all
coming up.
coming up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, any topic besides Those listed under item number 4 on the agenda, we will take public comment at the end. That'll be item number 5, the next item. Okay, anyone else care to address the council on these items? Okay, not seeing anybody online either, Brandon.
Chair, not seeing any movement or hands online, I would make a motion that we close the public hearing on these items.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, second by Councilmember Blair to close the public hearing. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. Any questions or discussion from council?
No, Chair, did somebody have a question?
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time understanding the argument about not competing with traditional banking institutions as the reason for increasing these interest rates. I mean, it makes sense to me, but to an extent, I'm not sure. Also, it makes sense to me to an extent, and so I'm just curious. Like if we're just raising interest, I mean, I may need a little follow-up explanation on that, please, because I'm trying to make sense of these, and I'm just wondering, these loans are, for traditionally community members who are probably at a little bit more disadvantage. And I think the help of getting a lower interest rate could be good for them. And so, help me just reiterate that a little bit, Sarah, again, please. Let me see if my...
Yeah, so basically we want to make sure our loan programs are filling a niche in the market that's not being met elsewhere.
But these community members, if they're non... I mean, they may still not qualify for traditional banking.
Yep.
Right? And so how would their needs be met if they're still not going to be qualified because of credit worthiness or history, financial history, et cetera? It's the same group of people we've been loaning money to. It's just that the one criteria here that it seems to be making this is the bump in rates from the feds and wanting to keep up with them. I mean, that's what I'm seeing here.
Let me see, I'm trying to think. So, as the Fed increases their rate, the bank rates go up as well. And so we just want to make sure that we have that headroom to be able to price our loans some percentage higher than what a bank would do. And generally what we try to do, so if we make a loan to a microenterprise, for example, at say prime plus 3%, right now that would be a 10% interest rate. Our hope is that within 2 to 3 years, that borrower is going and getting refinanced with a bank or credit union and at a much better interest rate. So we're just kind of the bridge to try to help get them bankable. And then once they're bankable, we try to encourage our borrowers to go and refinance. We're just kind of filling that gap during the period where the business is not yet bankable. And pricing the interest rate higher than what you would get for a bank is part of how we make sure that the borrower goes and refinances and builds that relationship with the lender that can help them more down the road. And then it also revolves the funds back in. If they go and get refinanced, then we get funds back in as program income that we can use to continue making loans with.
Okay, so it was going from what, from 15 to 18 or?
From 12 to 15%.
12 to 15.
And that's the maximum. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're going to be making all of our loans at 15%. We have made considerations in the past. For example, when we were doing the emergency loans in response to COVID, all of those were actually at 0% interest. In the past, for some of our smaller microenterprise loans, we've done more like a rate of 5%. Particularly for those microenterprises that have completed an approved training program. So we have some assurance that the riskiness of the loan has been mitigated by the fact that the microenterprise has invested their time and resources in going and getting the training that helps better prepare them to be successful and to repay the loan. So we'll continue to look at those factors when we take our loan recommendations to loan committee in terms of how we price the interest rate. But we do just want to make sure that we have the ability to keep that headroom to price well above prime for those loans that are maybe the most risky.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ready for motion?
Thanks, Sarah. If there's no other discussion, yeah.
Chair, I'd make a motion then that we adopt resolutions 2022-23, 2022-59, 2022-24, and 2022-25.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, second by Councilmember Ritchie to adopt the 4 proposed resolutions and ordinances listed under agenda item number 4.
Chair, can I just clarify that 1 and 3 and 4 are resolutions, number 2 is an ordinance? Just
Right.
for the record.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, this is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Chaburka,
Aye.
Councilmember Heyer,
Aye.
Councilmember Ritchie,
Aye.
Councilmember Blair,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lopez,
Aye.
Chair Nadolski.
Aye. That passes. Okay, thanks you guys for sticking around. Kathy, I hope to hear from you next time. Okay, next item on our agenda is public comment. So this is your opportunity to address the council regarding concerns or ideas of any topic related to the city.
My name's David Rawson. My business is Recycled Earth, located at 3027 Midland Drive in Ogden. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council tonight prior to finalizing the proposed budget plans for next year. As you know, we currently accept recycling, commercial and residential, from Weber and Box Elder County. We also have provided this service to Ogden City until last month. We have been operating on a month-to-month service agreement without a contract with all our customers. This allows our customers to choose recycling. We have tried to maintain a consistent service and a fair price, as we are a small local company and tax-paying private entity. Not only do we employ 25 people in our recycling plant and pay local taxes that benefit the community and Ogden City, we advance the circular economy and provide a great benefit to the community and the environment. Some months ago, we were made aware from some of our other customers of a price reduction offered from Wasatch Integrated. We were told Wasatch was trying to capture more of the market. I was very surprised to hear of the rate reduction, which is well below market for sorting recycling. We assumed that Ogden City had made the financial choice to move their material away from recycled earth due to this offer. But after reading the Standard Examiner article published a few weeks ago, I learned that the budget increases will be required by Ogden City to make this move. I was surprised that there was a substantial additional cost to the city, not less, to move recycling to Wasatch. I would ask for the opportunity to be a part of a work session with the council where I could prepare and present more information to help the city make the most informed and best fiscal decision. With regard to the recycling program, honestly, I would like to be part of the procurement process where a contract could be considered with potential rebates to the city, which the city could use for recycling education and program improvements in the community. We built our facility at the request of our community when the county canceled the recycling program. As a local small business, we need Ogden City's support, and we want to continue to provide the service to the Ogden community. Thank you.
Thank you.
City Council and the administration, thank you for letting us speak directly to you. At this time, Mayor Caldwell has been presented a gift on behalf of the community. 18 acres of vacant land connected to existing parks that he can pass on to future generations with a legacy decision. Or alternatively, develop vacant land into private subdivisions for the broader tax base. This once-in-a-generation opportunity of adopting the 18 acres as parks will still leave us with a current deficit of 2 acres. But your smart actions now will decrease future maintenance costs associated to a 52-acre park expansion plan by consolidating and connecting to existing parks. It's so smart of Mayor Mike Caldwell to adopt these parks now. If he is successful, let's rename Grandview Caldwell Park. An 8th grade student athlete sent the mayor an argumentative essay supporting usable open space and equitable public access at these 3 sites. Very smart essay. You've also seen a courageous 11-year-old girl speak before you asking to preserve open field space to play. I mention these young experts because we have a generation of in-tune young leaders on their way. We need to be patient and not sell out the future of the health of their community. Our young people want parks and usable public space that connects their social values of health with environmental consciousness and economic stability. It's not one over the other approach. Thankfully, our City Recreation Parks Department staff, under the expertise of Ed Bridge and Monty Stewart, are already ahead of us with a robust and well-thought-out recreation plan in Ordinance 2019-48. Our city experts like Jay Louder have identified the current deficiencies of 20 acres of park and usable recreation space. We will need 32 acres by 2028 to meet the demand of our experts. So what is the vision? I submit that we take on a 10 plus 10 plus 10 challenge. Let us have park accessibility to every resident with less than 10-minute walk. Let us have a minimum of 10 activities minimum at most of our parks. Let us have 10 parks that are destination parks. Park example 1 of a destination park. This would include a park to enhance wildlife and human values. Envision a park at North Jackson site that works with the natural environment, absorbing stormwater surging as a sponge park, teaching youth and adults about healthy eating with urban farming, and incorporating the biodiversity and ecological assets native to Utah. Thank you for taking the time to listen and represent us as a united council and administration, building value through parks and open space.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Before you sit down, can you just state your name for the recorder for the record?
Stephen Van Wagner.
Thank you.
Hello. You know why I'm here, for the water. I'd like that taken care of. But I'd also like to talk to you about what Steve just talked to you about. I think it is so important for Ogden City to increase the parks that they have. My children 20 years ago played on Lynn Field. They played over at Grandview. That was one of the best things that could possibly happen. Ogden School District thought that was important. They didn't charge us to use their fields. They thought that was a portion of growth. They didn't feel it was a revenue stream. I was always upset with Ogden South because they had to pay to use the parks. I didn't think that was right, being that Ogden City wasn't putting any money into the program of soccer. So again, I think that what you need to do is, again, I see so many of these apartments coming up, no green space, no parking. We need to do something to make sure that somebody who's growing up in a 600 square foot apartment has a place that they can take their children, that they can enjoy the outdoors, that they're not locked up. Again, Marriott Slaterville, we're growing our parks. We think it's important. We think that, again, people need a place where they can have green space. And again, I hope that you will pay attention and that you'll make this happen, because again, those are wonderful areas. Again, we used to go over, we'd play at Lynn School, and then we'd go over and we'd practice at 4th Street Park. I had my team clean up 4th Street Park Pavilion because it was so nasty for leftover from other people using the area. But again, I really enjoyed coaching because I got to have input on children growing up, helping them develop good values, having them being able to be a good citizens. And I hope that, like I say, I hope that you will take and make that happen for Ogden City. And I hope that you will get back with me on the water, because it's still there. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Yeah, what was his name?
Oh, sorry. We gotta bring him back. Carrie, can you come back up and state your name for the record?
My name?
No, sorry, I'm previous speaker. Come on up, Carrie.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. I'm hard of hearing, so.
Okay.
Kerry Wayne, Marriott Slaterville.
Thank you, Carrie.
I'm Ann Oakes, HOA president of Grandview Acres. As an Ogden resident, a former child who sought the great outdoors, a mom with children at home, and an owner in Grandview Acres, I ask that you please preserve Grandview Elementary and the 3 other open spaces as parks for our community. Grandview is used often throughout the year for soccer, youth activities, family and social gatherings, and sledding. The Grandview Elementary site has a parking lot that could be used to enhance Grandview Park, since the park currently does not have a parking area. Expanding Grandview Park would be a benefit to all the neighboring residents. Parks and open spaces are essential in our ever-growing city because they give groups and families spaces to gather and areas for us to exercise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Teresa Holmes, an Ogden resident, and I was a docent at Union Station. And I think the last thing we should be getting rid of is our museums. We only have 4 really decent museums. We have the Utah State Railroad, Browning Firearms, Classic Cars, and the outside trains, Eccles Rail Center. And people come from everywhere to see our trains, guns, and cars. And so what do you guys want to do? You want to get the station and get rid of our museums. Well, anyway, I've got 700 people in my group. We know that you guys don't have enough money to build any more museums. And the outside Eccles Rail Center, that's really important to our station. And why didn't you hire people that wanted to help the museums instead of gut them out? You know, that's all I got to say is I want our museums to remain. We have the Utah State Railroad. So what are we going to do? We're going to get rid of the railroad. And then the Browning Firearms. And how many people, do you really think the Eccles and the Brownings are going to donate to any of you after this happens? Are we going to get donations? I doubt it. And I wouldn't think any of you guys should run on gutting the museums and taking them out. Most people in Ogden, we love our museums. And people from Salt Lake, they ride the front runner down to see the museums. They're not coming down here to see some high-end dumbass, excuse my French, retail stores. That slipped, sorry. You know what I mean? And it's just incredible. You guys should see Lee Witten's video on the Utah State Railroad. And by the way, he got locked out of his office. He went to go to the library to get in after 22 years as a docent. Somebody back there locked him out and wouldn't even give him a key or tell him thank you after 22 years. And then me, they wanted to dump me really bad because I kept speaking up. So first I had to sign a non-disclosure. The next thing was, we're going to erase your 7,100 hours if you don't shut up. But you know what? I never shut up. People that know me will tell you that. Once I get into something, I stick with it. We need our museums. We don't have other museums. You know, and once these collections are taken apart and the station is gutted out, what then? You know, it'll never be back together. So I do hope you guys slow this down, vote no. And Trentelman told me you've been working on it for 10 years. But nobody seems to know anything about this. You talk to people on the street, and you guys have your public meetings. Nobody takes the paper anymore. Half the people have flip-top phones, so it's time to cool it.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Barbara Beck. I'm from Baker Mail Post 9 of the American Legion here in our fair city. I want to echo everything she said. Our military community is very upset about the potential loss of the Union Station, but our primary concern is the boxcar. I don't know if you know what that stands for. It's called the 40 and 8 boxcar. In World War I and in World War II, you could get 40 people, 40 military people, or you could get 8 horses. And they were taken all over the area during the war, during World War I and World War II. At the end of World War II, France, because they were so thankful for the services of our military men and women and the sacrifices made by our country, that they donated to almost every state in the United States a boxcar. They paid to have the boxcar shipped. When this one got here, it came first to Salt Lake, the capital. And it didn't take long for it to start rotting down because nobody there seemed to care about it. Nobody there seemed to understand what it was for and what it meant, what it stood for. Our post, out of our pocket, paid to get it transferred here. And for 30, 40 years, we've taken care of it. We've painted it. We've replaced the plaques on it. We've done everything that it needed to have done to it to keep it looking nice. About 2 or 3 years ago, somebody from the city decided we couldn't do that anymore. They cut our locks off. They put their locks on. We could no longer have access to it. We kept our paint, our tools in it where we used to keep it repaired. We couldn't touch it anymore. And you see what it looks like now? It's an embarrassment. And if that's what this city thinks of its military, if that's what this city thinks of the sacrifices made that warranted us getting that boxcar here, then shame on you. We want to know what your plans are for the boxcar. And if you don't care about it, give it back to us. Thank you.
Next.
Angel Castillo, Ogden resident. I'm going to talk to you about 3 things: the importance of youth sports, visioning for the future, and a failure to communicate. What you just saw and why Teresa is very upset and why those 700 people on the Facebook page are very upset is a failure to communicate. It is clear in the Make Ogden plan that there's verbiage, oh, we're going to make a new museum and it's going to be this big. And everybody being upset is because they don't trust you. They don't trust you or the administration to do what you say, because what's happening is there are no deliverables about when you're going to do this, where the money is coming from. And I want to take you back to March of 2020 when I was a planning commissioner and I made a motion to bring the Marshall White Center before you, and I reordered the CIP, and that got the ball rolling after 2.5 years. And I want you to remember the 50, 60 people that were here that talked about how important the Marshall White Center was. And that's youth sports, that's after-school activities, that's things to do. And the people that are pushing against you about Union Station don't have what you did for the Marshall White Center, which is codify it. Here's where the money's coming from. We are going to build this thing for you. We promise. And it doesn't matter who's in administration. We've codified $1 million every year for 5 years. That's trust. That's why the community believes you're going to do the Marshall White Center, because you codified it and you made it law, no matter what happens in the administration. That's what the Union Station people are looking for, the people that are pushing back. And the youth sports thing, we have an opportunity to provide kids a place to go, leadership skills, there's tons of white papers, I know you're aware of them, on what youth sports does. And we have an opportunity to make sure we're doing that. And if you're going, and you don't have to do just one, I know that we have to define where the money's going to come from and decide what type of project is going to be there. But if you buy that there's not enough time to do that, then I highly encourage you to make sure that those spaces are designated for after-school activities. And there is a revenue stream there. We do not have enough space to hold tournaments. Every high school, every college has tournaments which are money-generating things, and they need space to play on. It's one of the reasons why everybody's still kind of pushing that we want the Marshall White Center bigger. There can be a revenue stream. I encourage you to look for it, and I encourage you to do something different, because what got you here won't get you where you want to go.
Next.
Hello, my name's Teresa Bramwell. I just want to thank Ogden City for having the Christmas Village. I walked through it on the way here today. It's beautiful, it's historic. I'm glad it still exists. Other than that, I want to speak a little bit about redevelopment in the city of Ogden, because I've been involved kind of on the receiving end of some redevelopment projects in my life, and I don't think they happen the way people think they happen. So I was born at McCady Hospital. I grew up in Ogden City, went to Gramercy Elementary and Mountain Fort Middle School and Ben Lomond High School. I lived next door. I grew up on a small working farm next door to Farr's Orchard on Canyon Road. We had a couple of acres of land, and we had lots of trees, peach trees and apple trees, and we had a farm. So we lived there for about 25 years, all of the years that I was growing up. During the 90s, Ogden City decided that they were going to eminent domain Farr's Orchard to extend Monroe from 12th Street to 16th Street, actually up to 20th Street, because prior to that point, Monroe didn't extend through that area. So Ogden City eminent domained Farr's Orchard to create the road of Monroe. So next door to our property, which was about 250 feet deep, between Canyon Road and 16th Street, there was about an 11-foot strip of land that was left over that wasn't used for the road. So we, over time, made that part of our property. My dad took care of it. He watered it. He mowed the grass. And eventually, I think it was over the course of a couple of years, the city offered the land for sale. They didn't offer it to us, being the adjacent landowner. They offered it at a public sale. So they said, tell us why you want this land and we'll sell it to you. So my dad paid the $150 or whatever it was and said, I'm already taking care of this property. It's already part of my property, and I want to make it part of my land. And so Ogden City told him no. The land was sold to a developer, and I think I'm going to have to continue the rest of this story next week, and it will be fascinating, I promise you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else in the chambers in person before we go to online comments?
Shelby Pope, Grandview Acres. And you know, this really hurts me because I worked to have votes generated in the direction of some of you folks because I trusted you. And I should know better because I'm an old lady. You never trust a politician. So since September, you've had these properties available to do something with. But you did not find it necessary to inform any of us that had the potential to come up with some answers, suggestions, ideas. And now, one of the properties that is the most active for families, for children, for people walking their dogs, for people that just want to go have a place to rest for a while. You're going to get rid of it. Well, let me promise you something. I will go to work to get rid of you. Because you don't work for us. You work for yourselves. And shame on you. Thank you.
Next. Okay, we'll go to online to Heath Sato.
Travis, we have one more.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Heath, hang tight.
I got here late, so
I didn't
we're
want
at
to see you
public
get up
comment,
and sit
correct?
down again, Travis.
What's that?
We're at public comment, not
Yeah.
the RDA?
Yeah.
Okay, RDA hasn't said, okay. So with regards to public comment, I'd just like to thank the individuals that put the full list of Christmas Village together. I think that came in through last week. But the dynamic that I've seen with regards to feedback and everything else, we passed a lot of things in the Ogden City RDA meeting, or not the RDA meeting, but the City Council with regards to changes for the East Central Community Plan. And the comments back to staff said, did we have public meetings? And it wasn't a matter of public meetings, it was a matter of joint meetings with Ogden City Landmarks and Weber County Heritage Foundation. That's what I'd asked. It wasn't, did they have public meetings? Because the way those boards work, similar to this board, there has to be a timeline to everybody to come together and meet. And so I'd simply suggested historic preservation. And the only thing changed in all those ordinances that went through for the East Central Community Plan was translucent, transparent, 43A, 43B. And yet this is the legislative body. At any point they could say, if there's any demolition along this corridor, if there's any demolition in these new this new R9 zone, that should go to landmarks. We have this think tank, the upcoming item for Union Station, we have the Make Ogden plan. That entire design workshop says you have local expertise, rely on them. And yet it seems as if individuals that come pour their heart and mind into it, and then the aspect of when administration simply talks back and simply says, oh, we have all these people that have put thousands of hours into this particular item, and we'd like to have patience tell the big picture. There are residents and other people that have put thousands and hundreds of hours into their agenda items also. And so I'd just like to have a checklist somewhere, some accountability for when it's on, when it comes here before you. I have a street light on my corner for 6 years, no repairs. Why? We took $2 million of HUD money and told the rest of the nation, hey, you guys are doing without, so we can have curb, gutter, sidewalk, roadway, tree planting, infrastructure, lighting. UTA comes in, tears out one of the light fixtures, puts a new one closer to the corner, and the one further in from the corner has already been run over twice. And they didn't take that fixture and repair the other one yet. It's not a matter of trying to find money. It's a matter of taking trust of the money that's already been gifted to us and granted to us and entrusted to us and doing some simple repairs. How does it take 6 years to fix a street light? I don't understand that. And it's HUD money that paid for it. So we're telling the federal government and telling the rest of the nation, thank you, we need this money, and then yet we don't do anything with it. So please have some checklists and some accountability and then feedback to us, and I think it could dissuade the mistrust or lack of trust issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chambers before we go online?
Evening, Council. My name is Jaden Rohde. I'd also like to speak about, about the Union Station Initiative. I guess I'm kind of coming from a younger perspective. I just want to strongly encourage the council to maybe reconsider maybe some of the ideas that it had in store for Union Station. I remember growing up, I've always loved trains, I've always loved history, and I've always looked forward to visiting Ogden's on the weekends with my dad and visiting the museum and just soaking in all the history, not just the station itself, but also 25th Street and just how much of a integral part of the community it was. And Ogden can really take the lead in showing people in the Intermountain West and the state of Utah that we care about our history. We want to preserve it. Down south in Salt Lake City, Union Station is still there, but it's not really anything what it was. It's kind of just a shell of its former self. And when people come up to Ogden, they see, oh, Union Station is still up. There's still a museum. We can still learn about the history and be involved with it. So I just encourage that there's more transparency involved with it. And there's a lot of people out here, particularly younger people like me, who are keen in seeing the station remains that it is, and they're eager to donate their time and their money to keep the collection there and to keep things running smoothly. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll go online to Heath Sotto.
Hi there, Heath Sotto, Ogden resident. Just a quick note to let Ms. Polk know that you guys were also kind of in the dark about what was happening with those lands, so it's not all on you. I think a lot of times you're intentionally left in the dark. Anyways, in a November 16th Standard Examiner article, Councilmember Marcia White pushed back on those of us who have expressed concern about the Wonder Block bonds and other projects by saying, quote, "I haven't heard anything negative except from the people who don't want change." With all due respect, that's not at all what I or others have been saying directly to any of you in council meetings for some time, and it concerns me that we either haven't been heard at all or our positions are being intentionally misrepresented in our local paper by someone we elected to represent us. I'm not anti-development or growth. We are looking for growth in a thoughtful and fiscally sustainable way. I recently re-listened to the Minicozy presentation given to you in 2016, and he is brilliant in his understanding of the importance of downtown density in cities. And I noted his cautionary tale from the direct experience of ignoring infrastructure because I am concerned about ours. I looked for the reports the city commissioned from him as Urban 3, and I can't find them, so I've put in a grammar request for them and hope to receive them soon. The bottom line is that I'm looking for responsibility in our financial obligations to the public for infrastructure and public safety. I can find no publicly available due diligence reports, fiscal impact reports, or fiscal sustainability reports for the projects we're considering for bond now, so I've submitted another grammar request to see how extended or overextended we may be with tax increment financing and CRAs. Before we bond, we need to know exactly how much these things are costing taxpayers directly and how much infrastructure funding we have set aside until a date far in the future. You can't just give out TIF without a way to finance maintaining our infrastructure for decades to come. That money has to be intentionally set aside or our infrastructure will continue to degrade at an accelerating pace for existing users and new users of that infrastructure. That's a hard word for me sometimes, infrastructure. For us to build up a solid city, we need to make sure we're fortifying our foundation. Once I receive the response to my grammar request that I've filed with the city and county, I will share it with you, council members, as I think it's imperative that you're aware of how much we owe before we commit millions and millions more on our debt through growing corporate welfare. In your capacity as our representatives, it is your moral duty to us taxpayers to be fiscally responsible and practice proper spending restraint by being fully informed. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Heath. Next on the list is Ian Houghton.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Great. My name is Ian Houghton. Actually, I'd like to speak in support of the city acquiring the land being surplus by the school district. I lived in Ogden for 25 years, and I still spend a lot of time with a lot of friends and family that are in town. I used to chair the Ogden City Planning Commission, and I spent hundreds of hours writing a recreation master plan for the city in 2012 and 13. And in that report, and the most recent one that was completed in 2019, the need for additional sports fields was one of the highest priorities. I'm sure most of you benefited from the vision and planning of your community leaders when you were kids that allowed you to participate in team sports. And you're sitting in that position today to make the right decision for future generations. There's a number of reasons you can use to justify your support. One of them is, these land prices are actually pretty low right now due to interest rates. Ogden is going to continue to add denser and denser housing due to Weber County population increases, appropriate Ogden zoning, and the presence of the new BRT. And yet those families are going to need access to outdoor programs since they won't have large backyards. And right now, many young families choose to leave Ogden when their kids reach an age where schools and sports programs in adjacent communities more closely meet their needs. And we have lots of data to show that. I researched a lot of that data myself. So from a long-term planning and taxation perspective, additional housing on these sites ends up being a net negative from a revenue versus maintenance cost over a 20-year cycle, because you get all the revenue today when you sell it, and all the expenses occur 20 years from now when you have to maintain it, and everybody really sitting in this room is going to be retired from this position. And obviously talking about impact fees, that's a future topic, but improving and increasing the sports and recreation opportunities within Ogden are some of the best possible ways to encourage long-term economic and community development. Ogden has significantly fewer team sports opportunities compared to similar communities around the country. So this really shouldn't be all about short-term revenue at the expense of long-term growth in our community. But I suspect you're going to hear some arguments from the administration about why we should build houses on these pieces of land. I think it's disingenuous for the administration to say that 30 to 100 houses is going to make a significant difference in housing affordability in a community of 90,000 people. It just is not. When you have this huge benefit you can get from adding essentially space for substantial programming that benefits the entire community. And I think it's also disingenuous when the administration will probably suggest that we need housing for our firefighters and OPD. Those programs do not necessarily do what we claim, and I think we need to spend our time putting this property into the hands of some of the residents and volunteers, some of whom are in the room right now, who would love to step up and help you be successful and do this. So from a long-term planning perspective, we have one choice, which is to bank this land, put it in recreation space now, and even from the school district's perspective, I think they're making a mistake selling it. That's, again, a topic for a different day. If Ogden's population is going to go up by 20% over the next 15, 20 years, which is very likely, they're going to wish they had the land back. If it's in the hands of the city and sports organizations, I think we're all going to be ahead.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and next up is Michelle Wixom.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
Perfect. There we go. Hi. Yes, my name is Michelle Wixom, and I've worked with the Ogden sports community for a long time, and I help run programs with Utah Youth Soccer. And I'm here to speak on the parcels that are available for purchase from the school district. We would really hope that you guys would take some time to consider turning those into park space for our members in the area. Currently, Ogden itself has just over 3,000 registered members that play soccer alone in the city. It's a huge number, and on average, almost half of those players have to leave the city to play their home games. And what that does is that drives away family members from being able to witness their kids play. And it's great that they can carpool and go out, but what happens is when you have working families, they then miss out on those family opportunities. And at Utah Youth Soccer, we built a Legacy Fields program that is set in bringing soccer back to communities. So we've been raising funds and doing all of these things in the effort to partner with cities to just build parks. And so we would love to have the opportunity to sit down with you guys and discuss those possibilities, because we do understand developing parks takes money and takes time and takes community effort. And we would love to be at that table with you guys to help support you in providing that open space to your city members.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, anyone else online? Okay, seeing no other people wishing to comment, comments from the mayor.
Sure, a couple quick things. Appreciate everybody being here and your comments. To put one thing out there beforehand, that's why we have these conversations about what is the potential for some of these properties. So the school district, those are not for sale. We don't have an agreement. We don't have anything. It's a conversation that we're having right now to help us decide where we're going to go with that and what the highest and best uses of those properties are. And that's a collaboration we have with the school district and with this body. So thank you all for your comments. We appreciate that. And we've heard via email and through these council meetings for a while what your thoughts and concerns are, and we're certainly considering that, so I appreciate that. Another thing I'd like to address really quick, and I'll leave it at that, is the rumors that we're going to do anything with those really unique assets we have at Union Station are false. And we've been saying that for weeks and weeks and weeks and months. That is an asset that we want to protect. That's an asset we're absolutely committed to. That is an asset that will not ever go away. That will be a part of our community. That's up next on our next meeting. You're certainly welcome. And you can yell BS to me. That's not accurate at all. We have had meetings after meetings after meetings, and we're looking at ways to do that. And I find that offensive because we have worked really hard to protect and preserve that asset. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to get into any other arguments, but we have been unwavering in our commitment to that. Things that are said online and in other formats are not true. And if you want to stay to listen to what some of the plans are for that, it is to preserve and to protect that asset. And we're committed to that. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Council member comments?
Chair Radowski, I have two items. It sounded like, and I'm not sure this was the understanding, but with Grandview Park, the city-owned park is not affected no matter what happens. So that park will remain intact, and there's no discussion about that or the park adjacent to the Lynn Elementary. Those things are still city assets, will continue to be that. So nobody is talking about, torpedoing any existing parks. So I'm not sure if that was the understanding, but it sounded like by some of the comments that that might be the understanding, and I wanted to clear that up. And for transparency's sake, Mr. Van Wagner kind of pointed it out in a telephone conversation with me a few weeks ago, that the North Jackson property, I do own a property that shares a border with that. It is, I don't know how many feet it is. It's 10 to 20 feet long, and it's roughly over a canal. So there is no personal benefit to me one way or the other, no matter what happens. But I just did want to make sure that gets out there, that I do own some property that's adjacent to one of those. I wanted to clear that up, so.
Thank you. Other council members?
Chair, I'd like to just make a couple of comments. Wanted to recognize Weber State football on their phenomenal season, as just kind of recognize where they are. They, in any season where you can beat Utah State University, it's got to be a great season. And then also beating Montana, right? But beyond that, they put together a good season, so we appreciate all that they do for our community and developing some really high quality entertainment options, and both in all their athletics, and the volleyball also played in a national tournament. They were unsuccessful in their first game, but anyway, it's nice to see those things. Also along the lines of recreation. We did notice that at Ben Lomond High School this past weekend, there was a regional football tournament that was hosted by the school district and bringing in teams from, I think, as far away as California. So I think there were 10 or 15 teams, or I don't know how many anyway, but that's a lot of people coming to the community that was able to see what's going on here, staying in the hotels, spending money. That's awesome. I also just want to reiterate my position with the council on the history of Ogden. I love our museums. I love what's going on. And I know I've had many conversations with Mike, or Mayor Caldwell, sorry. I'm the new guy still, right? Still got a few more days on this in this first year.
He's still
but I think he often takes
takes pride in representing who Ogden is and the history there. The boxcar, that was a new thing for me. I'm curious to find out what's going on there. I'd love to see that taken care of. And so if there's anything I can do or we can do as a council or whatever to make sure that gets looked at. And then the last thing is I did drive down Marriott Slaterville, that road, and it looked like there was some work being done, or I don't know if they dredged it or something to try and deal with the water. I would be curious to see what else is going on there, but it does look like something's happening, so I don't know. There's still water, absolutely, still water there, but it does look like some things, I don't know what's happening, but it does look like something's being done. So anyway, those are just my comments.
Thank you, Ken. Any others?
I'll make just a quick comment just to follow up on the Union Station conversation. I'd be happy to talk with anybody. I hope you all will stay for the next presentation to see that we're taking actually one of the most important steps in what we can do for the station is actually purchase the land that it's standing on. So if you stay for the next part of the meeting, you'll hear a little bit more about that. And obviously super committed to making sure that the artifacts are safe and secure and taken care of in the best way possible. A study showed, of course, that the Union Station building is not really the most appropriate place for many of those collections. It doesn't have the proper storage, climate control, etc. But hopefully you'll stick around to hear more in the next meeting.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll just say that Tuesdays are tough. I'm not asking for your pity or for you to feel sorry for. I'm just saying that it's not enjoyable to sit up here. And I'll tell you why. It's not because you guys express frustration with us or disagree with us. That's definitely not the case. It's hard to, I think back to what motivated me and inspired me to do this in the first place. That was 7 or 8 years ago that I made the decision. And I say that I was inspired because I was inspired to serve. And there was a day where a lot of us in Ogden were inspired to serve. We were inspired to give. And it's what helped each of us fall in love with Ogden. It's certainly the case for me. And, before I had kids and when I first really started to engage in Ogden, the thing that really stuck with me was that Ogden loved me back. The more I loved Ogden, the more Ogden loved me back. And it was part of our culture that I really loved at the time. And I feel like we're just losing it. I just feel like we're losing it. I feel like we've lost it. And tonight's comments from our public, the people that want to be a part of Ogden, that love Ogden, reflect it. So as elected officials, we're stewards of resources. We're stewards of finances and money and resources. But we're also stewards of a spirit, and the spirit has been broken in this town. And that's the most hurtful part. It's the most shameful part for me. And if we are wanting to lead in this community, we have got to lead by engaging one another in real and meaningful ways, rather than looking at one another as someone that's in opposition to us or someone that we have to go through or endure in order to get anything done. If that's going to be our attitude, and I'm speaking to ourselves and to myself and to each other, this is what it's going to be. No project we do will ever be worthwhile because people don't trust us. It's true. We don't. And that's what leads to sentiments as we've heard tonight. So I don't hold those sentiments against you. I find fault in myself for allowing your sentiments to get to this point. I hope that each of us will look and think introspectively in our individual and collective role and think, hopefully with some sense of spirit and optimism, that we can regain that spirit of service to one another, because I still do love Ogden. I just find myself not loving serving Ogden as much as I used to, and that just breaks my heart. So anyway, thank you.
Chair, one quick comment?
Yeah.
I just wanted to, just for the record, I wanted to say that I am in 100% support of finding the right balance between preserving our open and green spaces and if that includes playable space for youth and for families, that's part of it. And I am an advocate for that, and I'm going to do everything I can to continue to advocate for that. And I have just very recently officially heard from the administration about the work that they are doing with the school district to look at purchasing these properties. But I have heard from community members that people from the administration and I guess some council members have known about these a long time ago. And I didn't know about it. And it is what it is. I think the administration is keeping up with their legal deadlines to bring information to us. But I am confused as to why we couldn't know about this earlier. And I'm confused. And at some point, I hope I can get clarification on that. But I just wanted to put that out there. It's important to me that as we look to continue doing all the development that we do, that we also pay attention to these other needs. I won't say names because it would be inappropriate for me to do that. But someone told me a story about an elected official that at one point they said when that person leaves, they're going to get some kind of a plaque or some kind of a trophy, and the most important symbol of that recognition is going to be a building, because that's what they focused all their attention to, on building brick and mortar buildings as a way to move the city forward. And I'm not saying that that's not important, but we need to figure out a way to maintain that balance there. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, second by Councilmember Chaburka to adjourn. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. We'll let the recorder reset before we Special Redevelopment Agency meeting of December 6, 2022. Let the roll call reflect that all board members are present with the exception of Board Member White, who is asked to be excused tonight. First, our item on our agenda is reports from administration. We'll be hearing from Brandon Cooper, the Director of our Community and Economic Development Department, on the proposed Union Station purchase and sale agreement.
Board members, good evening. Thank you for your time. I appreciate this opportunity to present to you Resolution 22-13, which is a resolution authorizing the executive director to enter into a contract, a real estate purchase contract with Union Pacific for the purchase of approximately 8 acres of land underneath what is formerly known as the Union Station. Given some of the comments and thoughts in our previous meeting, I'm inclined to take a bit more time in this presentation. If you all bear with me for that, I think that would be helpful. The reason why this is so important was alluded to in previous meetings, just as recent as the last one, and that is that we have a situation with our existing lease with Union Pacific that expires in 2027, and forces us to give up our leasehold position, which is the buildings, and therefore those buildings would revert back to Union Pacific. And so the number one reason why we're here before you tonight making this presentation is to preserve ownership and the future control of the Union Station. Subsequent to that, obviously, is to make additional enhancement, as has been spoken about so eloquently by so many people and by us over the last number of months and years. That includes the facilitation and the creation of jobs, and also the creation of a unique and vibrant downtown experience. Again, this is about 8 acres. The red hash mark is the actual land. The orange hash mark is the UTA tracks, and the blue are the tracks that will actually be part of the sale. Those tracks would be deeded over to the city along with the land under the building in the red, and that track would have an easement placed over it for the use of UP in terms of some of the events that they do. You see how the payment has been structured. The purchase price is $5,562,044. There is an earnest money payment at the time of execution of the contract, if that is decided. And then once we close, there's an initial $90,000 payment. The payments are structured over a period of 7 years to coincide with our annual budget year. And so that's triggered in July. Due to the timing of the contract, if this is decided on this evening and we execute the contract fairly immediately, then we would be looking at our first payment in July of 2023, which is our next fiscal year. And so we've allocated some funds for that in our preliminary budget discussions, and so that first payment and the subsequent payment would be covered. There are a number of considerations that are important to look at as a board and as an administration regarding this purchase. The nature of the environmental indemnity that is current language in the contract. We've tried unsuccessfully to negotiate better terms with Union Pacific, and so we've hired some legal counsel to walk us through some of the impacts of that indemnity and what it means to us. It's somewhat perfunctory, as we've talked to legal counsel, given the role that we have played as a quasi-owner of the property over the last 50 years. So we have owned the buildings. We've held leasehold improvements as a result of that on the land, and therefore there is this notion that we would be perceived as a responsible party just given that fact, regardless of the indemnity. So we're working through some of that. We have done some environmental investigations already to help us understand from a preliminary perspective what potential issues might exist, given the fact that this is land that's immediately under or adjacent to the actual building and not into the rail yard, which is currently and historically been operated as a rail yard. Then we fare a little bit better in terms of what might be impacted in the soil and groundwater. And the worst thing that we've come across thus far is an underground storage tank that would need to be removed based on our initial investigation. So we would do additional investigation that would include looking at potential borings under the building if that's an option for us. And so those are all considerations, and we would have some results to you before the end of our due diligence period, and I'll explain that when we get to the end. Some of the other considerations that are important are what has been spoken of so passionately tonight, which is the potential loss of the collections and the physical possession and access to the Union Station building itself. And so that would be a tragic ordeal indeed. And so the purchase of this building would obviously prevent that, and Ogden City, or the redevelopment agency in this case, would retain ownership of the building and allow us to move forward with what really is on everybody's mind. What is the future of the station and the surrounding land once the purchase is finalized and executed, if that's what is the intent tonight. In our work session last week, we talked about some context, and so I wanted to cover that a little bit more tonight with a twist, and that twist is to incorporate some of the comments or questions that have been on your minds as well as on the minds of others, and I think that will be helpful to hopefully dissipate some of the rumors and and indictments and set the record straight in terms of what we've done thus far and what our intentions are going forward if we are successful in purchasing the land. So back in 1997, and probably prior to that, but I only had the energy to research to 97. We have been looking at the usefulness and the future of the Union Station. And so in 97 and then again in 2004, this was before my time with the city, 2 studies were commissioned. At that time, it would have been by the city. And then I think in the 2004 study, the foundation was forming and there was some input there. But certainly the 97 was done by the city. And that was more of a study to look at just the building and the land. Most of these studies actually were focused mainly on the building and the land surrounding it. They studied the future potential of the station, and you can see some of the bullet points there that were a result of that study. And these will be a familiar thread across all the things that we'll be describing, that I'll be describing tonight. I won't go through all of those, but it should include a museum. It should be a self-sustaining solution, which I think is an important one. It should improve and increase public awareness of the downtown, foster local and other funding sources. So the list is pretty exhaustive with those 2 studies. Then in 2015 and 16, additional studies were commissioned. At this time, it was a joint effort by the Union Station Foundation, who had taken over ownership via agreement by that time, and Ogden City. And so the 2015 study was a programming and master plan study, and then the 2016 study was more of an implementation plan that looked at how to take the recommendations from the 15 study and implement them over a period of 5 years. You can see it's 2016 to 2021. I've listed some of the board of directors there. You'll notice that we had our very own Greg Buxton on that committee. Steve Jones, and others. I think Amelia Jones is here with us tonight. There she is.
Right over there.
And so a great cast of folks there that helped us understand what we had in terms of the condition of the building, and then what we wanted to do with it for future plans, and then how to do that. And so we have those studies. We've made those available to you online, and those are actually part of the work session transmittal last week. I can actually read this, but I don't expect others to read this. There are a ton of comments there that are, again, consistent to most of the comments that we've heard in all of the studies. Make an art gallery space, get rid of the yellow bathrooms, so check on that. We've done that already. The Browning Theater is a hard one, was hard one. I'd hate to see it go. It's a good size for Ogden. So a lot of good public comments. And again, those were commissioned jointly by the city and the foundation to understand what the future would do, or would be for the station. In 2018, the foundation took a turn. They realized that the 2016 study was an enormous undertaking with a massive amount of funding necessary to implement the things that were called out in the 2015 study. And so what they decided as a foundation was to wind the foundation down in all of its operations. And that first started with the management of the actual station. So in 2018, we negotiated an agreement that was signed by the board and the mayor. And that kind of dictated and outlined some of the steps that needed to take place to wind down that operation from the foundation's perspective and wind up the operation under the new control of the city. And I highlighted 3 things here that were really important parts of that agreement, both to the foundation and to the city. The first thing is the Union Station museums. And I won't read all of this. Again, all of these documents are available publicly. But number 3 there is the Union Station museums, and that talks significantly about maintaining a reasonable amount of space as determined in conjunction with another study that I'll get to in a minute, conducted by AGC. And that was actually referencing this study here in 2015 as well, but there's another one that we did also. And that lists the museums and their importance and those kind of things, and making sure that any future developer of the Union Station and surrounding grounds permanently maintain the same or similar space for the express purpose of housing the museums. And so this is a document that was signed by the mayor as he just spoke in the last meeting in terms of the city's commitment to the museums. Additionally, and an important component of actually being the owner of the museums, which Ogden City is that there's a certain museum standard and accreditation that we agreed to obtain and maintain as our stewards over the museums. And I'll get to why that's important a little bit later. But that's also a commitment that was made by the city to make sure that we raise the level of professionalism that was currently being held on behalf of the exhibits and the artifacts to a level of accreditation. You remember potentially Holly. She was our museum manager just until recently, and now we have Hope. And both of them are tried and true museum professionals with education and experience, and we're very grateful to have them. The third item there that we committed to, amongst other things, is the actual historic value of both the building and the land. And there's some language there that protects that in addition to the National Register of Historic Places. And so we recognize that and committed to that. Out of that agreement and all of that language that we contractually have in place with the foundation, we also did a visioning document. And again, we have foundation members here that were actually part of writing this. And that visioning document is called the Project Charter. And that charter was meant to really be kind of the summary of all the studies that had previously taken place. And so if you bear with me, I'd like to read some of the smaller print there. With the UTA Frontrunner as its transportation link to the Wasatch Front, Union Station will offer a broad range of uses including office, restaurant, retail, hospitality, meeting event, and various other commercial uses with associated parking. These ancillary, that's an operative word there, ancillary uses will be centered around the museum anchor, which purpose is to act as the nucleus of the site and provide an engaging and inclusive art, cultural, and educational visitor experience. Such commercial diversity will help to ensure economic sustainability, which, if you remember on one of the reports, was a key factor which carries through in all of the reports. And long-term success of the station will act as a catalyst for renewal for the areas to the north and south of the site. Because programmatic elements are subordinate to and reliant upon the condition of the building, its layout, capacity, cost of operation, and long-term viability, it is important that Ogden City, the foundation, and other key stakeholders pursue an aggressive and achievable redevelopment plan, which is what we're talking about tonight. Ogden's Union Station shall once again be a trademark of the community's identity and a projection of the city's robust economic condition. So again, this is where our head is at. This is where our head has always been, along with the foundation. Right about that same time, we as a city were commissioning our own study as it related to the economics of land development patterns. And we can spend a whole nother evening talking about the ebbs and flows of Ogden City's economics as it relates to our land development patterns. And in this case, we studied the value of an acre and where our highest value per acre was located at. And to nobody's surprise, it's in our downtown, as it is in so many other communities. And so what this engaged in our thinking and in our planning was something that has been consistent since the Meekum days and certainly through the Godfrey days and clearly and strongly with Mayor Caldwell, is that our downtown is the heart of the city and that value and density drives our economic sustainability. And so that study was important to us and has been the basis of a lot of our thinking since that time. And actually reinforce some of the philosophies that we were engaging with at the administrative level as well as the council level at the time. In addition to that study, I mentioned that there was a subsequent AJC study. They're an architecture firm locally, and we commissioned a study with them to specifically look at the needs of the museum exhibits in terms of their space. And a lot of folks that you've heard of tonight and in other settings talk about the museums as an exhibit. And that's important, but it's really a small sliver of what the role of a museum is exhibiting artifacts. There's a whole iceberg underneath that tip, so to speak, if you can kind of get that visual. And that iceberg is what's considered back of house. Where do you store the artifacts? How do you treat them? Who accesses them? How do you inventory them? How do you insure them? What about degradation over time in terms of climate and those kind of things? I'm not a museum professional, but I play one on TV, so I've learned all of these things, and they're significantly important. And I know you can't read this either, but in terms of the report that they gave us, studying our existing collections and our existing exhibits, and what we potentially could do with the museums, they came back to us and said, you need about 30,000 square feet just for the exhibit piece. And then you need about, I think the total is 113,000 square feet. So the remainder of that space you need for other things that is not exhibit. And so we clearly and quickly learned that the existing space of the Union Station was not only inadequate in terms of its size, but it was inadequate in terms of what it could offer our artifacts related to their preservation and inventory and management. So that led us to thinking about how do we care for our artifacts and collections, as well as the building in a meaningful way. Well, on comes the Make Ogden process. You were all part of that. We traveled to a number of places. We dealt with a lot of things. It took about 1.5 to 2 years. And in 2020, that plan set forth for the downtown a 25-year vision for taking the principles of the Urban 3 study and applying them in an episodic, meaningful way. And that is value and density in our downtown. We included social factors. We included historical factors. We included cultural factors. We included educational factors. And so it was a comprehensive study that was passed and has been kind of ingrained into our thinking since then. Here's a rendering of what the west side of Union Station and potentially the Union Station site could be. Again, value and density is the key. While preserving the historical elements and all of the things that I've described thus far as being important to us. The museum is an anchor. The Union Station is a cultural and historical artifact. Once Make Ogden was published, we then started focusing on our efforts, focusing our efforts on the actual campus itself. So from about 22nd to 27th Street. And in doing so, we worked with UTA. UTA owns a significant amount of land north of the Union Station, and in the past, they have run public solicitations that only looked at the development of their land through the TOD model, and it didn't incorporate anything that was related to the Union Station campus or anything to the south. So we asked UTA to work with us and to develop a plan that we both can agree with. And so that's the Ogden Onboard Station Area Plan. That plan was adopted approved by the Planning Commission and adopted by UTA's board as the station area plan for the Union Station, and incorporated some of the other concept planning elements that go along with that. And I want to highlight that word concept. Nothing that has been, nothing that you'll see tonight is a codified concrete proposal. These are all concepts and foundational ideas that help us to get to a point where we can have meaningful dialogue with stakeholders and other people. In addition to that, we went to the Union Station Foundation as they were winding down and going from a foundation that was really doing everything related to the Union Station and the museums to being somewhat of a fundraising friends of group to now trying to help us kind of just get through this development plan. And so we created a memorandum of understanding with them. And again, it outlined a bunch of things that were redundant to the other things that were in the previous contracts, reports, project charters. All of those things were reflected here. And essentially that MOU with them said that we need land that the foundation owns. Its purpose, its mission statement, its charter is to support the development of the Union Station and the Ogden City Museums. And so we asked them to do that in a way that was the most meaningful. And so we set out some terms and set up some conditions, and we're working through those things with them. And so we're doing that in lockstep. After that, in early 22, an additional layer was applied to all of that study, all of that feedback, all of that coordination with our key stakeholders. We added another layer, which was to look at the larger campus area. So the station area plan was just focused on the Union Station proper and the UTA land. We wanted to take in consideration all of that land plus more land to the south that we own and could potentially own. And so we established some critical success factors. Number one, create an economic engine. We've heard that before. Build a dynamic neighborhood. We've heard that before. Honor local history and culture. We've heard that before. And leave a legacy. So those, again, are just additional things that echo the words and the sentiments of our stakeholders, ourselves, and other people that we've talked to since 1997. And so I won't go through all of this, but this is a preliminary study that we did looking at vacant and underutilized parcels, what the station looks like, what the laundry building looks like. And then we studied 4 additional locations that could be an accurate precedent for some of the things that we want to do. Again, we've heard this before. We don't want to be Denver, or we don't want to be Boise, or we don't want to be Nashville. That's absolutely correct. We are Ogden, we are authentic, we are original, and we want to be ourselves, but better. And there are places in the world that we can look to as analogs and to learn from. And so we studied those along with our consultant, and they walked us through some of the things that were best practices, some of the things that they learned from that we could potentially learn from. And so this is, again, all publicly available. You could read that. And that resulted in this Ogden Station Master Plan Development Framework. Again, a comprehensive document that really is meant to be the summary of all its predecessors, all the way back to 97, including the adopted station area plan from UTA, incorporating the principles and the tenets of the Make Ogden plan. And so we looked at a bunch of things as it relates to the station. And I included this because I thought it was important as it relates to some comments about getting rid of the station or building over the station or doing some things that just aren't part of our intent. And this is a study that looks at allowable building heights and their location in relationship to the actual station itself. And you can see our goal is to frame the historic building. And we can do that with scale and height and material and other things that are part of this plan. Here's some, again, concept renderings that help us to frame the Union Station and to look at what might be available to build on the actual Union Station site. This is the property that we're talking about tonight that is the subject of our purchase, but it's not the campus. The campus is all the way to 27th, all the way to 22nd. But understanding that in and around the station itself is probably some of the most important to consider. We wanted to study that, and we did. Again, conceptually, we looked at how do you put a 115,000 square foot museum close to the Union Station so that as one comes to the station, they're experiencing the historic building as part of the museum experience. We know that we can't put our artifacts and our collections and our exhibits in the historic building and do it well. We can't get accredited doing that, and we can't raise the level of professionalism and care of our artifacts by keeping that in the historic building. But how do you blend the two and make it one experience? How do you get everyone through that front door, whether you're going west or you're coming east? And that brought us to the whole concept of relocating the front runner platform back at the historic train station. And that's something that UTA also supports and is part of their adopted Ogden onboard station area plan, subject to all kinds of operational and financial things that will work out. But again, we're here at a conceptual level studying these things and asking ourselves, how do we implement the values and the intentions of the people that have gone before us and us now today in terms of caring for our building and our artifacts. This is a little closer picture there, so you can see that there is a proposed museum. All the existing buildings are intact. The trains have a place. You can walk north and south on the site, and east and west, and that's a critical component in our planning. None of this is baked. We're just at the starting blocks tonight. As Angela mentioned, we are at a critical juncture in terms of this proposal of the acquisition, and once that takes place, then we can start to engage into a formalized process of actually designing this from a cartoon into a real plan that's implementable. This document is actually a reflection of the proposal that we received from a public solicitation that we did jointly with UTA. We took this framework document, again, it representing all the previous documents and all the work and information that we've gathered over the years. We took all of that, put it into the framework document, and then with UTA, we jointly solicited development interest for the campus, again, 27th down to 22nd. We, out of 3 proposers that included a team of developers, so there were 3 individual proposals that represented teams. This was the final selection. Again, baseline plan. This is an idea, a concept that got us excited, that we felt could be worked from and utilized as a baseline going forward. And again, this is some information that is just more specific to the land that we're talking about tonight. But a lot of exciting things, and part of the reason why the selection team picked this one over the other 2 was that it was most closely related to the framework plan that we published as a foundational document to the solicitation, and also represented all the values that we tried to communicate in that document. And so that's why we're here. And we're working with UTA in their process. We'll be coming to the administration, to the council, to announce that development partner hopefully in early January. So that's kind of a recap of what we rushed through last week in the work session. I hope that was helpful. Switching a little bit, I'd like to just cover a few questions that might be on your mind and might be on the minds of others that would hopefully help to put to bed some of the rumor and conjecture about this site and this process. So does the purchase of the land include the removal of the Union Station? The simple answer is no. As I've spent now 45 minutes or so talking about, this is one of the most vital assets in the community. It acts as the center of our downtown. It was the subject of 90% of the comments through the Make Ogden process. It will be the subject of more comments moving forward. And so the answer is no. We're not tearing down the building at all. We are seeking to enhance it. How has the city managed the station after taking over in 2018? As I mentioned, the foundation wound down. We entered into a contract, and then we wound up our operations, having the station come in as a division under Community and Economic Development. A couple of weeks ago, I transmitted to the council an information item that just helped you to understand some of the things that have happened at the station since we converted to the management. We've done a number of things related to collections management. You can see there we've inventoried over 50,000 artifacts. We still have a lot more to do, but our team has been working hard on that. We've done a number of facility investments with, I mentioned the yellow bathrooms, check. We've redone some of those bathrooms that were strategically placed with our event space. And then our attendance in 2021, 18,865. Currently, as of this month, we're at 18,434. So we're seeing good attendance. Our rentals are up, our events are up. And an interesting note is our pre-COVID hours versus post-COVID hours. It's true that we have lessened our hours, 5 hours per day, 4 days a week, instead of 7 hours a day, 6 days a week. And that was to accommodate our staff availability and the need that we have to operate the station differently than how it's been previously operated. I can't stress that enough. That accreditation pathway, our desire to increase the professionalism at the Union Station and to seek accreditation, requires us to do things that, frankly, the foundation didn't do or couldn't do. So we had to do different things. It doesn't mean that we're right and they're wrong. It's just different because we have a different objective. And so part of that was to shift people around and to decrease our hours. Will the museum collections be removed from their current locations before a new museum is built? The simple answer is no. There's no reason for us to move them from their current location until such time that we have a new building, which is why partly that we are proposing that this plan contemplates building a brand new building is so that we can keep things open and accessible while we build a new building and move things over systematically. That's yet to be seen. That is not a proposal we're making tonight. That could be a proposal in the future, but that's what we're contemplating now in terms of the information that we have. If for any reason that a new building can't be built, then we would look to keep the artifacts and the collections in the existing building and figure that out. But it would be at a substandard level based on the information that we have. What is the plan for the Utah State Railroad Museum rolling stock? Again, if you remember back to some of those cartoon pictures I just showed you, our current plans and our current concepts envision certain artifacts of that stock being accessible within an enclosed rail center, but then also utilizing some of those on the west side, the west side, as displays and amenities for that section. And so again, these are all concepts, ideas based on years and years of feedback and our desire to maintain those artifacts in a meaningful way. And you can see that picture again, the train hall is there. And if you remember the tracks that go on the west side, there could be a line of trains there. So as you get off from the front runner, you're greeted with these train artifacts that are wonderful and amazing. And I think it's a real strong statement for who we are as a train community. What is the environmental condition of the land and how will the agency deal with the remediation, if any? I touched on that a moment ago. Our initial studies are favorable, not perfect, but it's nothing that hasn't been encountered in most other environments in the downtown. So we're prepared to deal with that from a legal perspective. We're trying to get all the feedback, all the input from all the consultants that we can during our due diligence period. You can see that this map shows a number of borings that we made in key locations that the consultant felt were important to look at, and that's where the results came from. We've also studied the land to the south, and we've studied land to the north. Has a development partner been selected for the Union Station, and how was that process conducted? As I mentioned a minute ago, the answer is yes. There were 3 teams that responded. We followed UTA's process, and we're anxious to share that information as soon as we can. What funding sources are available for potential redevelopment activities at the station if tonight's action is favorable? So in addition to, keep in mind I mentioned economic sustainability. The station has been remodeled by the city and others a number of times over its life. And so without some kind of economic engine besides the general tax base of the city, we can't keep up with the maintenance of the artifacts nor the maintenance of the buildings. So there has to be an innate, coordinated economic engine, and that comes from private debt and private equity. We also anticipate that we would utilize all the available funding sources that are typical for these kind of things, new markets tax credits, historic tax credits. There's a whole host of things that are out there that we could bring to bear to help bring down the cost of the restoration of the historic building as well as the operation and maintenance of the artifacts in the museum. Does the funding of the Wonder Block project pose a negative impact on the future funding of redevelopment of the Union Station campus? The short answer is no. As we do our budgeting, we're very careful at looking at all of the redevelopment plans that are called for in Make Ogden. And so we would argue, based on the principles of Make Ogden and the episodic increase of valuation of the community through investment, that the initial projects like Wonder Block are actually vital to the financial sustainability of the redevelopment of the Union Station. And we learned that from Denver. Denver has a very similar situation as we had in terms of the decay of its downtown, the underutilization of its land, and the degradation of its Union Station. And everyone wanted to jump to the station first and say, put all your money into that and everything will flow from it. It actually proved to be the opposite. They built value, they built density, they built activity, and from that, they were able to then treat the Union Station as the gem that it was. And so we've taken that into consideration and are studying that, and that's our path thus far. Why have volunteers and other non-city organizations been denied access to the museum collections? I'll let you read that, but the short answer is related to our accreditation, having the ability to rely on a museum professional and their expertise in terms of handling artifacts. A good example is the painting of a rail car. Generally speaking, there's standards and guidelines and restrictions on how that is to go about if that work is to be subject to accreditation and to the museum guidelines. So not anyone can do that. The Boy Scouts can't come in and paint your museum artifact. You can't have general people handling certain things in ways that are not conducive to the rules and guidelines of the museum. And so these are things that are important to us as we seek to do things in a better way. And so that means we had to stop some of the activities that were currently happening. So those are the questions that, there's many, many more, but you're all looking a bit tired. So I'll just summarize again that this is the proposal, $5.5 million roughly, spread over 7 years. That was, I think, a generous offer. There's no interest attached to these numbers. These are straight line numbers. And if you look at the valuation of the building and the land together, which is essentially what we'll be getting, then this is highly, highly recommended. And we've broken our recommendation into 2 steps. It's a little bit atypical than what we're used to because, and you all can choose to do things differently if you feel so, but we felt that it would be important for you to authorize the executive director to enter into the agreement. That would put us into a contractual relationship with UP, but the due diligence period is such that we can terminate the contract prior to the end of due diligence, get all of our earnest money back, and not be committed to the purchase if that's something that we deem to do based on environmental exploration or any other thing that we might find in our due diligence period. So tonight, Resolution 2022-13 stipulates that, and then we would come back within 120 days roughly of now, and we would report to you our findings that we have looked at over that time, and we'd have another discussion as to whether or not we waive our due diligence and go to closing. So you get 2 shots at this deal. So I'd like to just leave you with one thing. Some of you might be familiar with John A. Boyle. He was a local entrepreneur, pioneer in the Valley, also the mayor between 1898 and 1899. If you bear with me, I'll read this because I think it represents how we feel about this project and all the projects that are proposed. I always had faith in Ogden and believed her future would be great. I believe her citizens the kindest and most enterprising in all the state, irrespective of party or creed. I think we should not be divided, but pull all together for the brightness and glory of Ogden. So I'll leave that with you and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Brandon. Questions for Mr. Cooper?
Jared, I don't have any questions, but I just have a comment.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon, I just wanted to say, number one, thank you so much for this presentation, because I know it answers a lot of questions that people have had. And also thank you to you and Damon and the whole team for spending about 2.5 hours with me one Friday morning, telling me all of this and giving me the history, because I was kind of doing some catch-up, understanding the whole history and the relationship with the foundation and all of the studies that we've gone into. So I really appreciate that.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Chair, I know that we've had this conversation, but I wonder if you would just share, if we didn't do this, what would that look like? If we didn't purchase the land, right? Then what would potentially happen? I mean, nobody knows for sure, but just kind of what.
Right. So the buildings are in our ownership, but the land is still in Union Pacific's. At the end of our lease, it's a ground lease for the land. At the end of the lease, the buildings are considered leasehold improvements, and they revert back to Union Pacific. So they would then own the land and the building, all the buildings. And so they would be able to do whatever they want with it. They can sell it. They could really tear it down. I highly doubt that would happen. Just because it's on the National Register doesn't mean it absolutely prevents that, but it is a good stronghold against it. So I think that they would seek to sell it, probably for more money, and then it would be open to the market as to what the downtown zoning would allow it to become.
Thank you.
I forgot my other question. I apologize.
Go ahead.
And we went over this in the work session, but I think it's really important for people to know how much have we paid for using this property over the years?
The lease is $19,000 a year. I don't think it's ever been changed, and that was 50 years ago. And I've never looked at the accounting, so I'm not sure if we actually cut a check to Union Pacific. If you're really interested in that factoid, I'll find out.
Oh, no, I guess I'm just trying to point out that it's pretty affordable
Oh,
for
yeah.
the amount of use.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
though we've done a lot of repairs and upkeep and staffing, et cetera, I think it's a very reasonable price to purchase the property.
Exactly. I did mention the 5.5 ultimately becomes the price for the building and the land because of the reversion. So we're buying the whole thing.
Thanks. Anything else? Just a comment for me too. I appreciate the presentation, the effort, the heart that you've put into this. I think Mayor Boyle and I agree, and I think he was forecasting my concerns and worries at the moment too. But I know that we have trust issues, and I know that we have communication issues. But I want to thank you for everything you have done to overcome that the best that you possibly can. You have tried really hard to overcome all of it. So thanks for that, and thanks for sharing your vision and your passion with this group and with this community.
Thank you. We have a great team.
Mr. Cooper, thank you for the presentation. It was really, really great.
Thank you.
Good job.
Jerry, I recall mildly, because I'm old and my brain is old. I was a young person in 1977 when this was initiated, and we never thought 50 years was going to pass.
Here you are.
You know, here we are. I didn't have a thought about it at all until I started getting involved with Planning Commission, and things come up, and we started to kind of get worried. Well, that is going to come up someday, and nobody could see us turning our back on it. I mean, it's just a bit unfathomable that we would do that because of, it's our logo. It's so much of what we are. And I remember years went by and we didn't even know who to talk to at the, the Union Pacific. We couldn't find anybody that had any authority to do this. And we appreciate and the people that work with you to find the right people, make the negotiations. It does seem like a lot of money, but in the long run, I think we're going to look back and say, boy, that was a bargain. And, it's like my own house. It was a lot of money when I bought it, but boy, I tell you what, I couldn't afford it today.
But you're glad you did.
But I'm so glad I bought it then. And that's the point I think we're at now with the Union Station. I can't foresee any circumstance that would make us want to turn our back on it, especially for that amount of money. So, and I appreciate the work that you've put forward and the outreach that you've had. So, but time does pass. It still keeps on passing. So,
it's been a pleasure, Chair. May I amend some things that I said, or augment, I guess, going forward, subject to tonight's decision. Going forward, the next time that you see me related to this will probably be to announce the development partner and to share with you a timeline that would launch us into the development of the campus. So we would have all the parties in place in terms of the key components, UTA, the city, and the developer. And so at that point, I will be able to outline to you how the community can get engaged, how we will, what steps we will be taking to allow for the foundation as a stakeholder, other key stakeholders, and the general public to engage in our process like we normally do. We'll have a number of open houses. This isn't something that we're going to rush. It's something that's going to take probably years to get through, but I just wanted to let you know that we do have that in the works pending tonight's decision.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else for Brandon? All right, we'll let you sit down for a minute. We might need to get Brandon a bottle of water after that. Okay. This is our opportunity to receive public input on the proposal before us. So if you care to address the board on this item, this is your opportunity to do so. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thanks.
Barbara Beck, Post 9 of the American Legion, here in Ogden, Utah. I'm impressed by the studies that have been done. Unfortunately, I don't think the public knows about any of them, certainly most of them. But you know, there's something else that I always heard, and my career taught me, that studies are kind of like polls. You kind of get out of them what you put into them. So just kind of vegetate on that a little bit. My purpose for being up here at this time is to again say, because I heard nothing about it in this presentation, what is the status of the 40 and 8 boxcar? What's going to be the status? You know, sitting back in the audience, we can barely hear anything that's said, even from the podium, much less from you. And the diagrams that he was showing made no sense, basically, to us, probably to you because you spent a lot of time with them, but to us, nothing. I saw nothing about the boxcar. When he talked about the city taking over from the foundation so that they could take better care of things, I can assure you the boxcar has not been taken care of. It's deplorable. It's an embarrassment. So I don't know who's supposed to be taking care of it. They took our privilege of doing that away from us because they said we weren't doing it right. So again, I say to you, what about the boxcar? Is it in these plans? Is it going to stay where it is? Is it going to be maintained and taken care of as it should be? What about the boxcar?
Thanks. We'll get you an answer. We'll get everybody's public comment, and then we'll go through and see what we can get for answers for everybody.
Hi, Travis Pate. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I think a lot of times it's easy to be downtrodden. I've felt downtrodden the whole time, every time I come and present, and boom, nothing type thing. And so I appreciate the aspect of the hard work and the discipline. There's no reason for you to be there except that you chose to be there on this board. So I appreciate that. And if I haven't lauded the comment of the public service side of things, I appreciate that. I appreciate your effort and willingness. I've run for city council twice, and so I know the effort to get there. And I think the unique dynamic, Mr. Cooper said he had the energy to research to 1997. I researched to 1887. And so I had that little bit more energy. So I feel a civic responsibility to just be a citizen participant. The dynamic was Union Station Railway Company respectfully represents that it has begun excavating the foundations of a Union Depot in said city immediately west of Wall Avenue and extending northerly and southerly across 5th Street. At that time, it was just simply 5th Street. We added 20 to it. And the said building is correctly indicated upon the blue plat map herewith presented. It is the intention of the petitioner that the railway company to prosecute work in said building until the same is completed. The structure cannot be erected while the 5th Street, wherein the same passes across the site. So we actually owned it right to the tracks. We owned 25th Street. And we surrendered it in order that the Union Station, the original one, could be built. And so the dynamic is, to me, hey, Union Station, Union Pacific, we donated this much land, so let's knock down a payment. We'll still make a payment to ourselves, and then that frees up roughly $750,000 towards investment in infrastructure. BDO was gifted to us by the federal government, but if you look back, we gifted it to them initially. But the gifting to us was that the initial investment goes back into infrastructure, curb, gutter, sidewalk, rotary, tree planting, lighting, sewer. I mean, that's the dynamic. If without a proper infrastructure, the whole castle fails. So again, I appreciate the aspect. Some of you may have been here in different capacities when we purchased the mall. $56 million investment in 1978, 79. We bought for $5 million, tore it down for $1 million. But that same 20 acres now has almost $186 million invested back into it. Remarkable return on the investment of your predecessors as a council, predecessors of the administration. Unique dynamics that we have here to celebrate that also. So I admonish you to just look at the purchase, renegotiate the purchase, and even say Union Pacific, we want to purchase rebate at this amount, if that's possible, so that we can reinvest that back into the property and do it properly. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
My name is Amelia Jones. I'm actually I have a lot of interests in downtown Ogden. I am the president of the Union Station Foundation at this time, and I would like to say, Brandon, I've worked a lot with Brandon. That was A+ presentation. You did a good job with that presentation. I think I think of all the things I can say, I've had a long history. I was part of the foundation when the foundation was running the museums and managing the Union Station building. It's a very challenging project. It's a very large building. It's an old building. Historic buildings are expensive. It was very difficult for us as the foundation because most of the collections are owned by Ogden City. The land was owned by Union Pacific, and the building was owned by Ogden City, so it was very difficult to see how we were going to raise funds and how we were going to really manage something that had all these different ownership components. You really can't. How are you going to deal with trying to improve a museum that sits on land that's not owned? So I think that it's a huge thing for Ogden to say, boy, I think it would be great. I really encourage Ogden to buy this land. I think it's very important for the museums. I think it's important to support the collections. I think if Ogden's going to buy that land, they also need to say we're probably going to have some more resources to put into the museums so we can have the quality museums. The Ogden City has, taken over the museums, and they've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot to be done there to have those, to get, more professional staff, more professional care of things. I know things have been difficult. I personally think that, communication could have been better. I think that would help a lot of problems. It's just better communication. And, I really think, personally, I think it would be a very good move to buy that land. I think it would be a good investment in the future of Ogden, in the history of Ogden, but it comes with a price which is more investment in the future and history of Ogden, especially in those museums. It's expensive. And let's see, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Amelia.
Hello, I'm your neighbor, Gary Wayne. Again, I think it's a great idea for you to invest in the Union Station. I think it's a jewel for the entire county and northern Utah. I think the Nature Center, the Union Station, Marshall White Center, and the trails, those are the important things in this area that we need to preserve. And I think a lot of the problem that I'm seeing people talk about is the fact that the diminished value that's being placed upon the Union Station. The hours have been curtailed. There's been reductions in staff and intimidation of staff. This isn't the first time when they mentioned the lockout. I've read about that prior in other handling with volunteers that they've been locked out. Again, I think I'd like to see transparency in the development. I think that's one thing that we really need. A lot of people are upset because of the fact that we have properties here that are being developed, being sold at a reduced value. We did the Arts Plaza, $5 million. Union Station's a bargain. And I hope that you'll take into account like I said, the value that this has provided to the entire state, to the western part of the nation, and it's worth the money. It really is. And again, whenever I come before you, it's issues. It's not personalities, okay? I just want you to understand that. I appreciate the sacrifice that each and every one of you make. It's not a job that I think anybody realizes how difficult it can be. And so again, I applaud you, I thank you, and I hope you'll do the right thing. Because again, making our community a better place. I'm out in Marriott. When Ogden's better, Marriott's better. In the same way, back and forth. So thanks again for all you do. Okay?
Thanks, Gary. Thank you.
Hello again. Angel Castillo, Ogden resident. So much to say. I'm going to cut to the chase. Obviously, I support purchasing this. We cannot afford to lose Union Station. It is a critical piece of our history and can be a great economic and cultural driver. I do, however, have some things I'd like you to consider. And for once, I am not going to complain about the developer selection process, particularly because UTA is driving the developer selection process, and they follow a process that is very similar to the state of Utah, which I find equitable and fair. We do not have that same type of system. I want to start by lifting up the best study that has ever been done in Ogden that you commissioned for the CREA. It is the only study that was run by an accredited professional that had crosstabs for income and census tract. It was a truly equitable study because you were going to be making big decisions about energy, and it was important to you to make sure that everyone was represented. And where we're going with this overall plan for Union Station is based on old data, with no crosstabs, with no equity, with no outreach. And I know a thing or two about crosstabs and equity. I've been contracted by Dr. Susan Madsen at USU to help her run some listening sessions and focus groups, particularly when it comes to economic status and ethnic status and location, urban versus rural. These folks have different needs. And right off the bat, y'all are having meetings that people who work 2 and 3 jobs can't attend. And while I wholeheartedly applaud your commitment to transparency by making sure that we do Zoom meetings so that people can attend, you're missing a wide swath of people. I participated as a planning commissioner in some of the Make Ogden stakeholder meetings. And as a planning commissioner, I was only there for 2 hours. There were days of meetings. If you really want to truly make sure that you understand what the community wants and what the community needs, you need to take the leadership role that you did with the CREA and commission a study that is based on census tract, that is based on income, to make sure that it is equitable for everyone in the city to know how you are supposed to represent them as an elected official. So I encourage you to say yes, purchase the land, but make sure before you start writing checks and before you start bonding that you have good new data. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. I've got a great presentation by Brandon. Well thought out. A lot of work went into that, and you could tell that was meaningful and makes that easier decision for you all to tackle, which is a big decision. So glad I'm not in your shoes. Couple questions. How does the track easement impact the new building proposed for the museum artifacts? So there was a track easement identified. It looked like from the overlay, it may be in the same location as the new building proposed for artifacts. Can the track easement be monetized by the city when UP wants to use it? In other words, if we're going to buy it, let's buy all of it. If they need to use it, we'll rent it back to them, just like they've done so for us the last 50 years. With a shallow water table at this location, are there any known historical contaminations? And if so, if there is contamination found, how long could the project be delayed? Those are my questions coming from the presentation. Thank you for the time.
Steve, can you state your name for the record for me again?
Yes, Stephen Van Wagner for the record again.
Thanks, Coach.
Yes.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Oh, we got.
Jaden Rohde. I just wanted to say that it was also a very good presentation. I think that I think calmed a few of the fears and answered a few of the questions I had about this. And I will say this is maybe not 100% convinced, but I think this is a good notion. I think Ogden City should look for the purchase of this. It seems like I guess something that's brought up is just to ensure that there's transparency involved, just so that I guess just so that our questions like this could be answered and issues resolved. I guess a buzzword that popped to my head was accreditation. I'm kind of curious if what exactly was needed by the current museum in order to do things such as repainting the Merci boxcar. Just wondering if volunteers were doing something wrong or if there was something that they could do better, because it didn't seem like that was ever addressed. So I think a lot of volunteers are a little frustrated of kind of like we're shut out, but why? I don't think that reason was ever really given to them. So I guess just to echo others, just to have a lot of transparency and a lot of, I guess, open discussion about this. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else in the chambers? Okay, we'll go online to Heath Sato.
Hi, Heath Sato, Ogden resident. Thanks for taking the time tonight to do this presentation. I know recently in a work session related to transparency issues on these things, I saw how frustrated you guys got with the administration that seemed to be operating in a manner that often appears to create an intentional lack of transparency. So there's a reason the public has no trust in these plans when they've not been codified in any way. When you were asked to, as the RDA, to buy the Wonder Block, Mr. Cooper presented that you'd likely get most of the money back, including almost $1 million pulled from the sewer fund by, whatever developer that bought the land would cover that most likely. And when you sold the land to the developer for $1 million just a couple of years ago, you were told those with the understanding that it'd be more than $1 million in perks for the developer, and that turned into, we're looking at like $100 million in perks now to the developer. And recently when I asked that same developer what was happening with their development of the Rite Aid block, he said directly to me, "Oh, we're only putting up an apartment tower on the corner now." That's not what we were told that we were investing in that land for as a city to develop it in a proper way. So there is no reason for any of us to trust the plans we are being presented until they are codified in law. I fully agree that we have no choice but to buy this land and preserve Union Station, but please do not expect people to just trust what we're being told about a future museum until we're presented with precisely just how we're going to pay for that. How are we going to pay for that new museum when we're bonding to the teeth on so many projects as it is? I have zero faith that that's going to happen in any sort of timely fashion. So please consider that when you see the distrust coming from the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no more hands raised online. Back to council. Actually, let's start with some of the questions that came to us. Brandon, are you behind the pillar over there? There you are. I trust you've been taking notes.
Yeah, I took some notes. I'll try my best to respond to some of the comments.
Okay.
There was a few comments about transparency. This is always a difficult one, not because transparency is hard. Transparency is actually easy, but the recognition of transparency is hard. Communication in general is hard. So as we transmit information, it's important that we transmit it correctly, openly, accessibly, and we try to do that in every aspect that we do. There's an equal obligation on the receiver of the information to receive it, process it, and then to ask appropriate questions and to have appropriate discussions in the case of misunderstandings and miscommunications. And so that's how we perceive communication as it relates to transparency. You have our commitment to be transparent. When you say we want to see transparency, that kind of implies that there isn't transparency, but there is in every aspect. The information that you just received tonight is up-to-date information. I know that there is a desire by a lot of folks, including myself in some cases, where you want to have all of the information up front before you make any decisions or before, as one mentioned, before trust is given. And in most cases, we're not able to do that given the process that we have between the administrative and the legislative side of the House. Our transmittal processes in terms of communicating are fairly rigid. We're trying to break through some of that, frankly, and be able to share more with you on an ongoing basis. But just know that we are transparent by nature. There's nothing to hide. There's no shadow games here. It is all upfront. And the information that you have tonight is the information. So there is no speculation beyond this. There is no need for folks to wonder, well, what's going to happen? We don't know. As I explained tonight, we are committed to a process of finding answers together. And as we do that, then we'll communicate that. But as of right now, we are fully 100% crystal clear transparent. I appreciate Travis's comment about renegotiating. I didn't know. I leave it to him to go back to, pre-mortal times in his investigation. I appreciate that, actually, Travis. But unfortunately, we are at terms, right? What is presented to you tonight is the negotiated contract. So there is zero likelihood of us going back and getting a discount, even though I really like the idea. I appreciate Amy and her comments managing the station. They knew that it was really hard for some time, and we learned that really fast. And I'd like to connect that to Mr. Brody's comments in terms of accreditation. Accreditation is the pursuit of a recognition by the museum world that we are a museum that's doing things that are based on best practices. And so in order to do that, you have to stop doing things that are contrary to best practices. And a lot of times that means that you have to disallow people from accessing certain artifacts or disallow work that was previously being done potentially by a volunteer and transfer that to a museum professional. So those things are hard, and those are some growing pains that we've experienced. We can't say that we were perfect in every scenario, but it was with good intention. It was meant to pursue that higher level of professionalism. The foundation, we don't say enough about the foundation's stewardship over the station during the time that they had it from 2004 to 2018. They invested in it massively, in some cases at the expense of Amy and her family. And so we owe them a great debt of gratitude for delivering to us the station in the very best way that they can do it. And they're still with us. They're still a key partner in moving forward, and we value their expertise, their knowledge, their experience. But I don't want to cast any dispersions on their efforts. It is hard. It's very difficult, which is why we need an economic engine to sustain that, because it's expensive. It requires professionals and professionalism that none of us have. Yeah, I think monetizing the track, the agreement that is presented tonight gives the right for UP to use the track based on notice, right? So we own the asset, but then we work it out with them. So we don't anticipate monetizing that, but we do anticipate that their activities on our track will be a benefit to us. Think of the big boy. Think of bringing in additional trains and other assets into the space. All of those things are going to be a benefit to us. So I don't know if going the extra mile to monetize those would be very fruitful. Yeah, and so in terms of the boxcar, I'd like to speak to you folks afterwards. We do have a restoration plan for that boxcar, and as was mentioned, there was some work done on it previously that no longer can continue, but that doesn't mean that we've ignored it. It's relatively in the same shape that it was, other than the fact that no one has been working on it since we've taken over. So we do have a restoration plan for it, and I'm happy to share that with you, and we can talk about that. In terms of locking people out, I think there's this big misunderstanding. So when we took over the station, there was no less than 76 keys to the building that were floating around in the community. And so the very first thing that we did was rekey the whole building and retain for ourselves the keys. I don't know of any professional organization in the world that would allow just random keys floating around for random people. And so we had to do some things that were in the best interest of the city, our security of the artifacts, and to just lock that down. So now we have restrictive access. And so unfortunately, some people probably just couldn't come to the building and open up any door or any case or any artifact that they previously could. And I'm sure that wasn't very comfortable. So that's the truth about that.
Thank you. What about did you cover the track easement and effect of the easement on the museum?
Oh, right. So what isn't depicted in the building is the location of the track in relationship to the building. And so we've been looking at how to incorporate the track, because we do need to use it as we move our own trains back and forth potentially. It's not often, but there are some times where we're going to need to move our own artifacts around. If UP comes in with their trains, we want to do that. And so we haven't quite figured out how all that works. There's a parking structure in one of the concept plans that's located adjacent to the tracks. So there's some neat ideas of building the maintenance facility of the larger trains in that parking structure. So that first floor is the maintenance facility, and it drives through, and then you park on the top. So it is a consideration. The tracks are highly, highly important to the operation of a train station, especially a train museum. So they'll be an integral factor in how we develop the site.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. Any questions from the council for Brandon or comments? I'll just say one thing. The care for the boxcar is a perfect example of service to Ogden, right? And I don't want I'm afraid of what some people in the room heard tonight. And I want to say it the way I wish you'd heard it anyway. I'm afraid that they heard that you weren't doing a good enough job, so we're going to do it better. Right?
Yep.
And I'm getting to know you more, and I'm getting to know your heart, and I know that's not what you would mean. But for someone, and this is that sentiment in the spirit of Ogden that I've talked about, when you care, you got a lot of emotion, right? And it's easy for that emotion to be triggered. And so I just want to say that thank you. What I wanted you to hear, I hope you do hear and feel, is thank you. Because without your efforts, that boxcar would not exist. Not only would it not have been gifted to us, but it would not be standing today. Is it in perfect condition? Absolutely not. Not from what I've heard. But we owe you a debt of gratitude for saving it and keeping it as a part of our community and our legacy. And I think what I heard you say was, thank you for doing that. If not for you, we would not have the opportunity to take this asset into the future forever. This is our plan in the presentation you just shared, to ensure that their work and the work of all of those that made that gift to us stays here forever. And that's the sentiment that I think we all need to remind each other of. There are no bad people in this room. There are strong opinions, no doubt, because there is a strong sense of love in this room and in this town, no freaking doubt, right? Yourself included.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you to everyone who has contributed to keep us where we are.
Well said.
Finally, we are going to do something that will ensure that your efforts are honored forever. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks for adding that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, if there's no more questions or comments from the council, we can entertain
Chair,
action.
make a motion that we adopt proposed resolution 2022-13.
Second. Oh.
It's a race. Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Ritchie, seconded by Board Member Chaburka, I think.
I don't know who else said it.
If that's okay.
There was thirds.
Okay.
It's all good.
I think everybody wants to second it to adopt proposed resolution 2022-13. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Heyer.
Aye.
Board Member Ritchie.
Aye.
Board Member Blair.
Aye.
Board Member Chaburka.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lopez.
Aye.
Chair Nadolski.
Aye. That passes. We've taken an important step to save the Union Station. We have a lot of steps ahead. And I hope that one of those steps, and a step that stays with us the entire time, is some step toward healing and coming together like our mayor in 1890. When was it? Travis, Rich was there. Let's keep that sentiment front and center. Comments from the executive director.
I'll just pinch hit for that for a minute. And I just wanted to briefly echo the sentiments of Councilmember Chaburka and really thank many individuals in the administration for all the work that went to culminate in where we were tonight with that proposal for the purchase of the land. And that includes the Ogden City Legal Department, CED, our partnership with the foundation, and just many, many years of work. And I would say that that was really equivalent to moving mountains just to get to this point today. And I appreciate your vote of support on that measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments from board members? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Heyer, second by Board Member Ritchie to adjourn. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.